and welcome back to another episode of the Stripped Whole podcast, where we challenge our faith and our perspectives, and we find hope and encouragement in whatever season we find ourselves in. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's jump right in. I'm so excited to be finally getting a move on and getting these episodes churned out. I'm loving podcasting. It's definitely my new favourite thing. I'm here again in the middle of this crazy season of self-isolating, and apologies if I ever slip out Hebrew words in the middle of my English. It is a bit of a mind shift for me to speak entirely only in English. So I'll teach you a new word, okay? So this is a very important word that you will need if you are talking about being in self-isolation. The word for that is bidud. And I'm talking about being in bidud all the time at the moment. So apologies if that word slips out. I'm here in Israel. It's a beautiful day. It's been lovely and warm. My kids have been outside doing chalk sketching on our deck, and we're loving the springtime here in Israel. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about fire and the price. And I'm even going to include some music. So get ready for that. So what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit was the song that I'm going to play to you in a little minute. It's the song 5 Stones that I wrote. And it's one of my favourite songs that I've written because I didn't really write it. It was one of those very rare moments that you get as a musician and a songwriter where the words everything just tumbles out. The whole song in its complete entirety from beginning to end just tumbled out without any need to craft or edit or change or shift. It doesn't happen often, and I know that those songs are always special because it's not me. I am just sitting there and it just comes out, and this was one of those moments. And it was a song that was written in a very, very vulnerable and dark place. I was in a very, very deep valley at the time, and something that God has really shown me through my walk with him is how the depths of those valleys mirror the heights that he wants to take us. And it was in that moment of understanding, I am so low here, I'm in such a deep valley, but pressing in to that place and not trying to fight it or run away from it. And this song came out in the middle of that place, and it was really just an acceptance of what God seemed to be doing in me in that moment. And it was just really a prayer in that moment that God would you just hurry up and do it? It was a kind of, okay, fine, I'm here. Would you wield me? Would you put your fire on me? Whatever it is that you need to do in me to get me to be that powerful weapon in your hand, will you do it? I'm here already in the valley, so do what you've got to do. But it was a real moment of surrender because I think God really had challenged me so deeply about the idea of David and his 5 stones. And he'd spoken to me about how the 5 stones in that story are so significant. I think we so often wash over these details in the Bible so quickly and so easily. It's amazing sometimes to actually really stop on the details and just think about why it's there. I did that recently when I read through the book of John. I didn't read it a chapter a day. I read it like a paragraph a day, like a section, those sections that they mark out with little headings. I just did one section a day, and I focused in on like every detail, where the commas were going, why that comma is there, why. I've never done a study on punctuation before in my life. I'm just not that kind of person. But it was so interesting, and I got so much out of it. I'm sure I wouldn't be quite as effective if I did like the genealogies or something. But in this particular book, it really helped and emphasized to me some amazing details that I totally had missed and totally would have just read over had I not been doing it so slowly. And this is what happened to me when I was thinking about David and these stones. It's so easy to just read over and wash over the detail that he'd picked up these stones. And I think for me, God really spoke to me about how those stones represent my gifts, and how David had picked up those stones that had been, who knows how long for, being gently shaped by that river, because he picked them up from a brook, right? They were being shaped by, and it may have been that there were times when that river was dried up and those stones were being shaped by the sun and the dust and the wind. But those stones were being shaped and smoothed and made perfect for their use. And those stones did not know when the day was going to come that they were going to be used. And God really spoke to me about how my gifts are like those stones. They need to be being shaped, and they need to be ready for that day when somebody or something or God comes along and needs them to be used. And so this is something that I will probably talk about another time in more detail, but it became a real thing for me that my gifts need to be invested in, even if nobody knows about it. And that's what David was doing. David was for years exercising that muscle of his slingshot. He was taking care of his sheep. He was protecting them. He was using his slingshot against bears, against lions, against who knows what in the middle of the night. I mean, the kid must have been an absolute expert with this thing, because he only picked up 5 stones. I'd have been picking up, like hundreds. Like maybe one of these might even reach somewhere within a meter of this giant. But he only picked up 5 because he knew his gift and his ability was sharp and ready. His tool was ready. And I think that is really what God had been speaking about to me in the lead up to me writing this song, which I'm going to play. It was a moment where I had surrendered my gifts to him, and I had said to him, okay, I'm putting all of these gifts on the altar in front of you, and I'm asking you to wield them. I'm asking you to put your fire on them. I'm asking you to mold them and shape them, and to really carve out what it is that you want from these gifts, and what it is you want from me, so that I'm ready on that day that you pick this thing up. I'm ready to slay a giant. And that's what today's episode is all about. Let's have a listen to the song.
I don't have much, but what I do, I give it all to you. It may look like nothing much, but it's all for you. I don't have much, but what I do, I give it all to you. It may look like nothing much, but it's all for you. 5 stones is all I have picked up from the dust. 5 stones is all I have, and I give it all to you. And I give it all to you. Fashioned into an arrowhead, maybe laid into an altar. will slay. Only in your hands. Who knows what giants we will slay?
So I think what I want to talk about following that song is just about the fire and this wielding. The thing that I love about the story of fire, there's so many stories about fire in the Bible, but one of my favorites is the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. What I love is in the last episode, I spoke a little bit about short term pain and long term gain. And this is such a great example of that is, God could have stopped Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego from ever being thrown into the fire. He's about to perform a miracle. He could have prevented it from ever happening in the first place, but he didn't. He allowed that short term pain because he knew the long term gain of this throwing into the fire episode is going to exalt him above all other gods, including Nebuchadnezzar, who thought of himself as a god, is going to exalt him far above and beyond him and all other gods. But the interesting thing is that God didn't prevent them from being thrown in there in the first place. And I'm sure there were several points along that way where it was a little bit painful for them, maybe not physically, because it says in the Bible, I actually read this morning in my readings, it actually says that they didn't smell of smoke and the hair on their head was singed. So I don't think that they were physically hurt by this, although it might have hurt to have been tied up by huge, strong men. Apparently these people were very massive. But I love that God isn't afraid. He's not afraid because he knows the outcome. He already knows the long-term fruit of a situation. And we have to just have faith and trust in that he's got it. And this was kind of my heart behind this song that you've just heard, is I'm asking God to come in and wield me and actually shape me and actually invest time, effort, sweat and tears, if you like, into the process of shaping me. Because I'm quite a stubborn individual. I'm quite a strong, opinionated person, in case you hadn't figured that out. I'm not a person who easily gets shaped, and God has to go to quite drastic measures with me to shape me. One of the prophecies that was given over me actually at my bat mitzvah when I was 12 years old was that I was like a wild stallion that needed to be tamed. And I remember as a teenager feeling quite scared of that word, because taming a stallion is quite a process to watch and go through, and I didn't really feel like I was up for that challenge. And I was really like resentful almost of God saying that you've made me this way, and now you're saying I have to go through all of these horrible things in order for me to be not the way you made me. But actually what I've come to understand is that we are actually like those wild stallions. He creates us with all of this vision and passion and drive and strength, and we channel it, and we're messy all over the place. We just allow this strength to be dominating. And I always described my smallest kid who is a force to be reckoned with. He's like a tornado. As a child, as he's still a child, as a 2-year-old, I used to describe him as like a bowling ball. He just destroyed everything in his path. It was like watching, a tornado destroy a village. When something was in his way, he just went straight through it. And I love that about him. He's got the most incredible character and strength, but he's going to have to learn as he gets older where to channel that strength and how to rein it in and how to actually listen to that still small voice. Because when you are like a wild stallion or a bowling ball, which seems to run in my family, you find it a lot harder to hear that small voice, because you actually feel like you know what you're doing, or you actually feel like you've got the strength to get through this particular situation. And it takes actually a lot more strength to deliberately and intentionally put your strength down and listen for that small voice than it does to just power through and get it done, which is always the temptation that I have. And in the writing of this song, and in this season I was in of this very, very deep valley, and this season of really being of understanding that God was wanting to do a very deep thing in my life with my gifts and with my character, one of the things that he really spoke to me about was how fire doesn't fall on an empty altar. And in my presenting to him of my character and my gifts and actually I was a bit of a mess at the time. I was just presenting kind of leftovers to him. It was a presentation of an offering to him, and that's when the fire falls. And actually, when the fire falls, it's more pain. You're inviting more pain into pain. But what we don't understand is that we all want fire, but we're often not willing to pay the sacrifice. We all want all the hype and glory and the moment of the fire falling, but we don't understand that that's not going to happen if we don't put a sacrifice on the altar. And I think this was such a huge moment for me in my life when I realized, I'm putting this on the altar. I'm asking God to take these gifts, to take this character, to take this strength, and his fire is going to fall on that, and it's going to consume everything that isn't good. And that is going to be the most empowering thing, the most anointed thing, and the most, well, actually it's going to be the most powerful thing and the most anointed thing, because there's none of me left in it. It's going to be all what's left after the fire's fallen. But I think this was it, really. It was, I'm thinking about David, I'm thinking about Elijah and the fire falling, I'm thinking about Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fire. I'm thinking about all these different things, and I'm just like, but I'm just this tiny little me. Like, I'm not David, I'm not Elijah, I'm not those amazing people in Daniel. I'm not those people. I'm just little me, and I'm just really delicate, and I'm just really struggling, and I'm in such a deep valley, and I just want God, and I just want his will in my life. And he just spoke to me so clearly about, if I put myself out there, he will wield, he will shape, he will empower, he will send his fire. And all I have to do is keep going to him in that secret place and keep presenting to him that sacrifice. And I just have to be willing to invest in those gifts in the secret place without anyone ever knowing about them. And they'll go into my toolbox, and no one might even know about my toolbox. But they'll go into my toolbox, and they will be sharp and ready for the day when God says, right, come on, today you're going to go and deliver some cheese to your brothers. And little do you know, you're going to slay a giant today. I mean, David must have been so confused on that day. He's delivering cheese, and suddenly he's smashing a giant's head. I mean, what a day. But he would never have been able to take down Goliath if he had not have been investing in that quiet secret place every day, probably, without anyone really ever seeing it or knowing it. And those stones would not have been ready for use had they not been eroded and gently massaged actually by the water or by the wind into being these beautiful smooth pebbles that were ready to take down that giant. So I want to just encourage you today that if you feel like you're in that low valley or you're walking through a fire, be encouraged that you're bringing something to the altar. You're bringing something of a sacrifice that God can bring his fire onto. You in presenting yourself in that place to him are a sacrifice, and he can work with that. He can bring his fire because it's not an empty altar. And so be encouraged that that's what he's looking for. He's looking for a willing, surrendered heart who can present itself to him, and a willing heart and spirit that can allow his massaging and eroding, corroding spirit to shape those stones so that you are ready and sharp when he calls you up for that day.
That's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me on this Stripped Whole podcast. If you've liked what you've heard today, please leave a rating and a comment down below so that we can hear your feedback and do better next time. Thank you, and I'll see you on the next episode.